Bret Weinstein is an interesting figure to say the least, not because of the evergreen controversy that gave him an unprecedented attention he always deserved, but because of his ability to perceive connections between human biology and the damaging effects of our actions in political, social, economic, and private realms. Where others see problems, Bret Weinstein presents them as symptoms caused by actual problems that are deeply rooted in our Darwinian nature. With this perception of evolutionary connections between human biology and the systematic power structures, Weinstein points to the dangers of algorithmic censorship, manipulation, and surveillance perpetrated by monopolistic corporations like Google, Facebook, and Apple on behalf of democratic governments. Weinstein illustrates that these are authoritarian virtues that aren't exclusive to totalitarian regimes, and that democracies aren't immune to the very biological nature of humans they are composed of. Weinstein calls this an evolution towards ruthlessness.
So let's look at a thought experiment about how evolution of strategies in markets would function. On the left, you have a benevolent corporation. It does only what's in the public's interest. In the middle, you have a ruthless corporation that does only what's in its own interest, irrespective of the cost to society. And on the right, you have a corporation that's more realistic. It's a mixed strategy. There are some costs it will inflict on the public, there are some costs that go too far, and it tries to balance those concerns. Now imagine that these companies face a series of choices across a year. Occasionally, those choices will make what's good for society exactly the same as what is good for the company, in which case, what we get is no competitive advantage. They're dead even in competition. But most choices aren't going to look like that. There will be equally rare ones in which what's good for society is exactly the opposite of what is good for the company, in which case only the ruthless corporation can profit from the opportunity. But the common case will be somewhere in between. And in this case, we see why evolution in the market is producing some of the phenomena we're experiencing. In the case that what is good for the company is somewhat different from what is good for society, the ruthless corporation has the greatest advantage. Why? Because it can do anything it wants. And the corporation that is bound by what's good for society can't do anything. The corporation that tries to balance these concerns finds that it competes best with the ruthless corporation the more ruthless it becomes, and the outcome is predictable. In the end, in sectors of our economy where there is not a lot of room for utility-increasing innovations, we see an evolution towards ruthlessness that has predictable consequences. And that has interacted with what I will claim is the central flaw in our system. And when I say system, I mean our global system, with the US at its head. What we have here are feedback loops that interact. Wealth that is made in the market is capable of increasing one's power over regulation. Power over regulation allows increased opportunity to make money in the market. This is a positive feedback loop. That should scare any engineer or biologist, because positive feedback loops that are not bounded by some negative feedback force are unstable. They detonate, they explode. In our case, this feedback loop has re-engineered our system cryptically and turned it into an engine for the concentration of wealth and power. And it has installed amongst an unelected group of very powerful and wealthy people effective veto power over any attempt to change from the status quo.
We can take this concept to understand how the government has built a massive surveillance state by relying on the emergence of monopolistic megacorporations that homogenize and centralize the nationwide network to make it more susceptible to surveillance attacks. You could have hundreds of Unix-like distributions built into computer devices by default, essentially erasing all single points of failure. Or you could enable a Microsoft and Apple duopoly in the desktop systems, and Google and Apple duopoly in mobile operating systems, and make secret surveillance cooperation arrangements with each of them. It's only natural for a multi-billion-dollar spying agency with secret budget to seek a system that enhances their power structure. A diverse cyber system would be much more secure and resilient to attacks, and would render the existence of the NSA too costly and redundant, and thus, just like any other government agency competing for public resources, directly benefits from pushing for a discourse that makes building a system that needs their existence possible. On September 1st, 2017, Jordan Peterson and Bret Weinstein sat down with Joe Rogan to discuss their perspectives on personal motives behind Adolf Hitler's authoritarian ruthlessness. This debate took many interesting turns. One of them in particular was Weinstein's short hint at the dangers of corporate manipulation of social discourse and algorithmic censorship of behemoths like Google.
That, we've heard this many times recently about the Trump administration, about if he's impeached, that there will be some sort of a civil war. I believe Roger Stone said that. Like, this thought is so terrifying that we literally cannot do anything to stop some sort of physical confrontation with weapons if we disagree ideologically, that it's going to happen.
Well, first of all, there's a lot we can do. And
Sure.
in fact, one of the other things about the evolutionary toolkit is that I believe we have exactly the tools for navigating this puzzle. They're built into us also, in addition to this latent program. But we are now in a very dangerous situation because, for example, if Google and other of these online Goliaths start deploying algorithms that decide what we get to talk about and see, then we cannot use the very tools that are necessary in order to escape and avoid something like civil war.
Notice how this was Weinstein's direct answer to Joe Rogan's concern that it seems impossible to avoid a nationwide armed conflict between opposing factions in the US. I wish Weinstein could have continued to elaborate on this concept, because it could have explained much darker and more serious issues that could actually threaten the existence of democracy in the Western world. Unfortunately, this was only a brief mention of a much larger concept that Weinstein didn't return to for the rest of the debate to stay more focused on other issues they were discussing at the time. But the issue of concentration of control over the internet by tech monopolies is much more central than many people see. Many people just focus on the free speech aspect of this, but in Weinstein's logic, censorship is only a symptom. The real problem is the surveillance economy built by corporate monopolies abusing our trust in their products. The reason why privacy is the more severe issue is that the level of censorship we are dealing with in our time seems to have an intentional direction, which wouldn't be possible without the architects of this censorship having bottomless access to the pool of data exposing how everybody develops their thoughts in private, where users trust companies wouldn't use this private information against them. In another podcast, Weinstein had a chance to return to and expand on his idea a little bit further, that this centralized manipulation of social and political discourse is only possible due to our unskeptical willingness to hand over unrestrained access to our private psychologies to any corporate entity which surveys we intend to consume. Collecting, analyzing, and profiling years' worth of our private data has enabled these corporations to figure out exactly how and what we think in real time, and even predict our future behavior with nearly perfect accuracy. Listen carefully to Weinstein's analysis of how the design of smartphones impacts our psychology so that they are capable to extract as much private data as possible.
But aren't they just attractive to people? I mean, that's one of the reasons why a phone is so addictive, is because it's attractive, because you can get access to information at the drop of a hat, so you just constantly want to feed that machine. You constantly want to what can I do? Can I play a game on it? Ooh, can I take a picture of myself? Ooh, can I give myself a dog nose? Ooh.
Right. But imagine, I mean, it's amazing to me that it's even hard to do this thought experiment, but put yourself in your own mind 15 years ago and present yourself the deal that the phone represents. Hey, Joe, check this phone out, right? This phone is going to allow you to navigate in a place you've never been. It's going to connect you with all sorts of people who share your interests. You're going to be able to say a sentence that you think is clever, and suddenly hundreds or thousands of people are going to be able to react to it. I mean, all sorts of marvelous things. And then the point is, well, here's the downside, okay? You're going to be hooked into mega corporations that are going to study your psychology, and they are going to compete in order to keep you paying attention to their site. And they're going to become so sophisticated that you're going to lose control over your own mind. You are going to become addicted to it in the way that you might become addicted to nicotine, right? So that's a pretty high cost. What's more, you are going to surveil yourself. You're going to surveil yourself, and your only protection from surveilling yourself are going to be end-user license agreements that you're not going to be legally sophisticated enough to understand. And so you're going to be at the mercy of whoever has access to your phone camera, your metadata, your, all of these things. So the point is, if you said this to you 15 years ago, you'd know to be afraid of it, right?
I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be like, I'll put it down if I don't like it. Okay,
well, I must tell you, if you told me that I was going to be bugging myself with a sophisticated device like that, I can't even turn it upside down because there's a camera on both sides of the damn thing. Right? I mean, the cost is really high, but we signed up for it incrementally in a way that never left the ability to say no. And what's worse, it is now inconceivable if we discovered that the net cost of such a device exceeded the value of it by 10 times. We still couldn't get rid of them.
You can't pull them back.
You can't unmake them.
There's too much benefit to them, though. You're making it seem as if it's only a negative. But it's not only a negative. It's also answering every single question you could ever have about anything technical, anything involving history, anything involving facts. And obviously, in today's day and age with hashtag fake news, you're going to get a lot of bullshit facts in there as well. But just the sheer access to information, the ability to contact each other instantaneously. There's a lot of pros to it.
Huge number. Believe me, I'm not underrating the value of it. I mean, you pointed to it yourself. Having even just Wikipedia in your pocket is that's such a fantastic gift to have that access to information, not only on your home computer, but right there in your pocket. That's amazing. Right. So I'm not saying the benefit isn't spectacular, and I've signed up for it like everybody else. But the cost is very high and didn't have to be. In other words, if you had set the bounds in which the market was going to solve this problem so that you, for example, prevented it from breaching our ability to protect our own privacy, you could have had the benefit of Wikipedia and instant communication and all of these things without the huge downside.
So the privacy issue being cookies or cameras? Which one are you referring to?
Well, first of all, I think the cameras are a bit of a red herring. I don't think anybody, first of all, there's a huge amount of data involved in video. To the extent there's an issue, it would be more about the microphone and the fact that it can listen into conversations and basically track who's thinking what. And there's so much power in that potentially that even if it's not being used presently, it's only a matter of time before somebody taps into that data and starts using it to shape things they are not entitled to shape.
The identity politics that has frequented the content on the internet lately almost seems like it comes orchestrated by those who hold their hands on the keyboards, typing codes into algorithms controlling the internet content in a manner that intentionally divides us further and further into echo chambers and personalized filter bubbles. This wouldn't be possible if it weren't for Google's and Facebook's access to everything we do online and even offline. Censorship and manipulation would never be this effective if they didn't have unrestrained access to study our psychologies. Maybe it could give you a pause to reconsider whether the ever-expanding divide between political tribes in the US and the West in general is nothing but a result of years-long manipulation of your social news feeds. Many people think they can't be manipulated just based on the fact that someone is constantly looking at and analyzing their private lives. But this couldn't be further from the truth. There were multiple studies researching how manipulation of Facebook news feeds affects people's emotions, where they successfully managed to trigger positive or negative emotions purely based on how Facebook decided to filter the content they were exposed to. You are human, just like anyone else, and you react to what you see. If this weren't true, Google wouldn't make over 90% of its billions in annual revenue from advertising. Facebook wouldn't become the most attractive platform for advertisers if the data from your browsing history, instant messaging, and other online activities Facebook collects weren't valuable. If your digital privacy couldn't be monetized, Amazon wouldn't sacrifice all revenue they could make from sales of their devices in order to make so much more from your private data.
Our approach is premium products at non-premium prices. So we sell the hardware at break even, so we don't try to make any money when we sell this hardware. And we hope to make money when people use the devices, not when they buy the devices.
Here, you have it confirmed. There is an evolutionary link that explains why privacy matters. Don't give corporations and government agencies access to their psychology anymore. Start protecting your privacy. It matters for every other right you want to exercise. Educate yourself. Switch to Firefox or Brave browser. Install uBlog Origin. Start using Tor browser. Be anonymous. Switch to Signal for instant messaging. Use DuckDuckGo or StartPage as your default search engine. Sign up for ProtonMail or Tutanota. I have plenty of tutorials on my channel, so feel free to use them to the full extent. You can't have freedom of speech without a private realm where you can uninterruptedly develop your speech without judgment. In the days of algorithms deciding what you can see and say, and AI power concentrated within a few tech monopolies, censorship happens way before you even express your speech. It happens by profiling your psychological processes in private so that they can easily manipulate your expression you make in public.